Whatever happens, happens. I'm taking it day by day, but it's time for me to get paid. It's time for Mr. INT paid. For more on J.C. Jackson's future with the Patriots, let's begin our deep dive right there with Phil Perry and senior NFL reporter for CBS Sports, Jonathan Jones. Jonathan, Phil Perry doing yeoman's work, getting a little frustration out from J.C. Jackson. What are your thoughts on his comments and where he stands right now on the first day that teams can tag a franchise player?
Yeah, great work by Phil. I mean, time to get Mr. INT paid. What a quote. Right? What an incredible quote. And listen, I completely agree with Mr. INT. He deserves to get paid. He should get paid. This has been an issue of mine, an issue with a number of folks as it relates to the franchise tag. It depresses the market, not just for that particular player, but also for other players as well looking to cash in. Because when you take those top guys off the market via the franchise tag, well, you can't really get the other dudes, the number 2, number 3 guys bumped up all that much. So that's an issue that the Players Union has been fighting and losing the last several years and will continue to lose because of what the NFL owners want. All of those things said, J.C. Jackson will absolutely be a New England Patriot in 2022. He's going to line up as their number 1 cornerback in week 1, whomever they play. That's because he's too good to be allowed to leave the building and only ultimately get a compensatory pick for his services. The Patriots have gotten off very, very nicely with J.C. Jackson in terms of having to pay him, or rather not really pay him over the years. In fact, I thought last season when they slapped the second-round tender on him at just under $3.4 million that maybe a team would offer up a draft pick for him and go and get him away from the New England Patriots. We're only talking about a guy who has some of the best ball production of any corner of the past 4 years in the National Football League. And really, Xavier Howard and Trayvon Diggs are the only guys in his echelon. When you talk about getting your hands on the football via interceptions or pass breakups. So the New England Patriots will not be allowing him out of the building. Will he get franchise tagged? I ultimately believe he will be tagged. I am not a fan of that, but that's the way it is, and that's their right, and that's very likely what's going to happen.
Phil, you think he won't be? You think he could get tagged and traded? Why?
Well, I think that's a possibility. Like I said off the top of the show, I think he'll be here on the tag. I think that probably will be what happens at the end of the day. I think the reason why some players wonder if that will happen here in New England specifically is because they've seen the team's history. Some really good players have walked out the door for essentially compensatory picks, whether it's Jamie Collins, Chandler Jones gets traded, Malcolm Butler walks out the door, Trey Flowers goes for nothing but a compensatory pick back. So Devin McCourty, Dante Hightower, occasionally these guys that they bring in as rookies and they develop and they become among the best in football of their positions, occasionally those guys do get paid. But even with those guys had the opportunity to go out, see what their value was on the market, come back to the Patriots, and they work something out. If J.C. Jackson gets to the market, my expectation is there's going to be a team out there that's willing to give him more than the Patriots would be. Jonathan brings up a great point. That second-round tender that the Patriots gave him last year, now, granted, he had the best year of his career, arguably, this year, so maybe he's improved in their eyes, and they did offer him a contract extension midseason. But that second-round tender had a lot of people scratching their heads because it wouldn't have taken all that much for another team to swoop in and take him off their hands.
Jonathan, you mentioned you think he'll definitely be a Patriot in 2022. He'll play on the franchise tag. Do you think in that process, this is a duo that's going to be able to come to a long-term deal? Or do you think the Patriots will bide their time, tag him this year, and move on from J.C. Jackson in 2023?
Yeah, well, there's another Jonathan Jones there at corner, right? So I do understand the slight confusion there. No, listen, it could very well happen. And, listen, they're not going to slap the tag on him tonight. If they do, then it is a shot across the bow from the New England Patriots to J.C. Jackson and his representation, letting them know this isn't going to be an easy negotiation. What is very likely to happen, because this is historically what happens with teams, is let's wait a week till we get to Indianapolis. Let's talk with your representation at the combine. Maybe there's a deal to be hammered out, or maybe we just see where both sides stand, and then the tag will be applied there on March the 6th or the 7th or the 8th. There's really no rush to do that right now. And then you have until mid-July to get a deal done. And as Phil has mentioned, it probably will not be that Jalen Ramsey deal that's around $20 million or a touch more than that, but it would be more than Tre'Davious White's deal of $17.25 million per year. Would it get up to that Marshawn Lattimore stratosphere of $19+ million per year, or Marlon Humphrey? I think that's really where the rub would ultimately be. We all understand a long-term deal would be better for the New England Patriots for their salary cap this year, because it would relieve that guaranteed $17-ish million cap hit that J.C. Jackson would cost them this year. So what ultimately will it be? What will happen over the next several months? Listen, I've seen negotiations go very, very sideways over the years.
I did a story on J.C. Jackson and this impending situation for the Patriots all the way back in October, and talked to a few league executives. What do you think he might be looking at this coming off season if he gets to the open market? And what came back to me was top 5. He's going to be a top 5 guy. So he's going to be ahead of Tre'Davious White. He's going to be in that range that Jonathan's talking about there, just below Jalen Ramsey. But even since then, Trenni, that was back in early October. All J.C. Jackson did after that story was written was rack up 5 more interceptions, and now he's locked up the fact that nobody's got more picks than him in the last 4 years. So he's going to get paid if he gets to that point.
Notice how the Patriots did not win a single Super Bowl during that span where they did not have a top cornerback, but they did reload the position, starting with Darrelle Revis. Of course, helped the Patriots to that Super Bowl in 2014, torch that was then passed to Malcolm Butler, Stephon Gilmore, and now J.C. Jackson. All right, rejoining us now is Jonathan Jones. Do you need a number 1 corner, Jonathan, in today's NFL? Because as Phil has said a million times on this show, it's really more about the offense anyway.
It is, and I don't think that you absolutely have to have a shutdown, lockdown corner, right? You don't have to have Deion Sanders reincarnated, because there are only a couple of those dudes walking the earth anyway, and the LA Rams have one of those in Jalen Ramsey. But I do think, as we talk about how the NFL is more offense, right? More points. That's what's you look at the Cincinnati Bengals and their 3-headed monster there at wide receiver. You got to have a dude that's going to be able to stop them at some point. And so, do you ultimately spend $17.5 million in a cap hit for that one guy who can line up across from a Jamar Chase? It's a difficult proposition when you're up against the cap the way the Patriots are, and I appreciate that issue. However, when you look at the last 5 games that the New England Patriots have played against the Buffalo Bills, J.C. Jackson has lined up across from Stephon Diggs at least 2/3 of the time. That's the team that, however you want to argue it, that you're chasing, that you are competing with. They're in the AFC East. And so that's the guy that's been lining up with their guy. And I just don't understand why you would move on from this guy. Forget about the salary cap. Forget about whatever trade compensation. Forget about whatever history says this team does. I can't see you letting this guy out the building.
It really is hard to picture, just because of how strongly they have felt about playing man-to-man defense. Maybe more consistently than any defense in football over the course of the last several years, going back to the time when Brian Flores initially took over that defense in 2018. They've been right there with the league leaders. But having a lockdown number 1 corner doesn't guarantee you anything either. Unfortunately for the Patriots, you could argue they've had the best corner in football the last 3 years, between Gilmore in 19, Gilmore and Jackson in 20, and Jackson this past year, and they haven't made it past the wild card round or past the divisional round, Trenni. So it's really difficult to say, if we get that guy, he solves our problems, because he doesn't.
Okay, what if, and this is not a report, this is just a prediction, Pro Football Focus has said, well, Charvarius Ward is a possible free agent target for the Patriots. If you have Jalen Mills coming back and you have Jonathan Jones, who is going to be back and hopefully better this year, can you add a guy, Phil, like Ward for 3 years, $34.5 million? And does that fill enough of the void? And then you're not paying that franchise tag and you've got someone more long-term.
It's a sliding scale, right? Does it fill enough of the void? How great is your offense? If your offense has the ability to outscore the Kansas City Chiefs or another great offense like the Dallas Cowboys, who they had to go against this year and gave up about 600 yards of total offense, then great. But if not, that's where the equation becomes more difficult to me. So it's a question of how Bill Belichick wants to build. I think he does want to build around a good defense, around a good running game, around a sound offense that executes through the air when it needs to. So is it enough? I'm not sure, because I'm not sure they have enough offensively.
Is he a good enough consolation prize, Jonathan?
No, I don't think so. Just because of the ball production, just because of when we talk about the 8 interceptions, when you talk about the pass breakups, when you look at the qualified DBs who played the amount of snaps that J.C. Jackson had, their average number of pass breakups this season was around 5. He had 11. So you're missing that. Did he give up some big plays this year? That's probably the one knock that you have on him. But otherwise, no, I don't think, and Phil's absolutely right, it is a sliding scale. What ultimately is it worth to you? I just keep going back to, you're going to see Stephon Diggs at least twice in a season. And if this past season plays out again, 3 times.